You prepare, and then you have to let it go. You have to let it go. You see, amazingly accomplished Olympians prepare for 4 years and then trip and fall in the middle at the beginning of the race. I mean, there's nothing they could do. It just was what it was going to be. So the only choice that you really have is to just be present and allow whatever's to happen to happen.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. It's Audley Stevenson here for another edition of hands down the most audacious podcast you'll find on the internet. Mark my words for it. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod. And then if you head over to our YouTube channel, or perhaps if you're watching this episode on YouTube right now, then you know there's a little bell down below that you can tap, and hey, subscribe to our channel. And that way you're connected to all great things audacious related. Now, the topic of conversation on this edition of the podcast is all about mastering our mental performance. And it's an important and somewhat emerging topic, considering the increased attention that society on a whole is placing on mental health and mental health awareness. There definitely is a correlation between our mental mindset and our ability to perform. And I like the fact that it's starting to pick up momentum and become more widely recognized, in large part thanks to a number of athletes who've spoken up openly and bravely about this topic. I think of tennis star Naomi Osaka, Olympic gymnast Simone Biles was quite verbal and outspoken on the topic. You had NBA players like DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love, plus a whole host of others. I'm pleased to have Ayanna Sealey joining me on the podcast to further expand on the topic. And Ayanna is a mental performance coach who incorporates her unique experience as a former Broadway performer and a master's in performance psychology to help artists, high-level executives, and athletes realize their potential and achieve peak performance. Essentially what Ayanna does is she helps performers in any regard unblock themselves so they can truly present in alignment with their true purpose and to the degree that they are able and capable of. So really, really excited to have Ayanna join me on the podcast to talk about this topic. Really appreciative of her for giving the time. And I think she really did a great job hitting home some really strong points when it comes to achieving mastery over our mental performance. Such a big topic and such an important one as well. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Ayanna Sealey. Enjoy. Ayanna, it is great to have you here with me on the Audacious Living Podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's, we're long overdue, but I'm happy that we're doing it now.
Yes. But we made it happen. And we were just sort of, before we went live here, we sort of talked about the now, and I think that kind of is a good sort of segue into our general conversation about mental health and performance and all of these things. So before we get into that, maybe the starting point is to get you to sort of talk about your work as a mental performance coach. I know you work with athletes and executives and a whole host of individuals to help them perform better. So yes. I'll get out of the way and let you talk about what you do.
Okay. So I come from a performing background myself. So I'm a dancer, singer, actor. I did that for almost over a decade before I went back to school to do psychology, specializing in mental health studies. So I'm very passionate about that. And then I specialized in my master's in performance psychology. And so yeah, I connected to performance psychology. Of course, when you look at it from a distance, it's like, of course, she's a performer. So, but there's a point where that all clicks. And actually, it was funny because it happened through sport, and it happened through me looking at the Olympics and seeing Asafa Powell Jamaican sprinter, not be able to medal in the Olympics, but always able to medal in the world championships. And then that was one of the turning points. And then another turning point was that I couldn't study unless I was watching a Blue Jays game. Odd, I know. And as I watched the Blue Jays, and this was just at the beginning of my first degree, I just started noticing like the difference from week to week in someone's performance, in someone's ability to execute, someone's ability to hit. Their average would fluctuate. Why is that? What's going on? There's nothing physically wrong. And so that's what started kind of gearing me towards the aspect of performance that, I mean, I performed for many years without actively and consciously thinking about the mental side of things. You just kind of go with it, you figure it out. But then learning, I mean, yeah, I learned that there was this whole field dedicated to the mental side. And so this was a perfect fit for me as an actor studying character analysis to then just sift into psychoanalysis as in psychology, right? So this is how it happened. And it's just fascinating. Like we were talking right before we started about being in the now, being present, and how important that is in your performance. If you are outside of the present, it will affect your performance. If you're thinking about what happened, there's nothing that you can do to control that. If you're thinking about what could happen, there's nothing that you can do to control that, right? And so being in the now truly is being able to learn how to relinquish control, how to just go, I can be as prepared. I mean, I always say to my clients, prepare. Like that's the thing that you can control, is how much time you put into your preparation prior to your performance, prior to your speech, prior to your competition, your race, whatever. You prepare, and then you have to let it go. You have to let it go. You see, amazingly accomplished Olympians prepare for 4 years and then trip and fall in the middle at the beginning of the race. I mean, there's nothing they could do. It just was what it was going to be. So the only choice that you really have is to just be present and allow whatever's to happen to happen.
Right.
So
what's interesting, and I know we're talking about sports, but performance can be anything. And you sort of gave a few examples of, and I think that's an important one, because sometimes we're performing and not even realizing that we are on stage. And I use it, it's a stage as an analogy, if you will, because that could be anywhere. This conversation we could deemed as a performance, if you will, right? So I think that's important for people to understand.
Absolutely. And I say exactly like what you said. I say, whatever arena you're in, whatever stage you're on, whatever, even if sometimes I have, I've got executives who have to do presentations and are sick to their stomach for 3 weeks beforehand. Like it's just such an agonizing process. I have, someone who needs to have a conversation with their partner and is worked up and doesn't, cannot navigate the waters of like how to stay calm, how to, so it whatever stage and arena you're in, and it can be pretty broad in terms of where that's possible.
No, I think it's a really, 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 really good point. I do want to jump into this sports for a moment, only because that's where we start. I know you're probably quite comfortable in that arena, and thanks to the Blue Jays, helped to get you where you are.
Die hard. Die hard.
So then you're excited about this coming season. I would digress a bit, but
am.
I am as well too.
I am. Yeah. And I'm a big Raptors fan too. So I love
Yes.
those two teams. Those are my teams. Yeah.
There you go. There we go. Support the home clubs. That's what I say.
Yeah.
But I bring up sports. I touch on sports because what I find interesting is oftentimes when you see an athlete struggle,
Mm-hmm.
a LeBron James, let's say, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't give the performance that we're expecting from them, or there's a dip in the numbers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What oftentimes happens is the next day or the next couple days thereafter, they're in the gym and they're working on their shot, or they're working, but it's not, the physical isn't always the issue. It's again, as you sort of alluded to, the mental sometimes comes into play, and I think that's where maybe the connection isn't always made. That there's some time needing to be spent on our mental brain capacity.
Yes, absolutely. So I am a huge advocate for, as much as you train your instrument, your body,
Yes.
your technique, your skill, you have to also be training your mind. What I would say though is like, you hear of people like Kobe Bryant and, who would just go, and I don't know how many 3-points he would do before anyone even showed up for practice.
Right.
I think what that does though is that allows you to become so comfortable, right? So it's part and parcel. So you do have to train and solidify the physical, because you want to know that it's so ingrained in your body that when you go to be in show mode, right, performance mode, that's not something you have to worry about, right? You can actually go and you don't want to worry about the mental either. Like both things have to be working in tandem so that you don't worry about them when the time comes. They're just tools that you can draw from. But when if you imagine, like as a dancer, for instance, if I have to worry about like a jump lift, then I'm pulled out of my moment, right? But if I've practiced enough and I'm so confident, then that's something that I can take out of the equation, right?
It's an automatic process.
It's an automatic process. Gotcha. So that's just one thing that you can do. So I understand that, but I do agree that you do have to, as much as you implement the physical, you got to every day practice. Because remember, a lot of people, say our generation, are coming into this 20s, 30s, 40s. You've been practicing one thing for decades. So you got to rewire, relearn, get the brain firing in a different direction. So it's all practice and it's daily. It's not a one-off fix.
And so I can see people saying, okay, but what does that look like? So practice, how do you practice? What is there, am I doing crossword puzzles? Am I doing, word searches? What does that look like? Right?
Yes.
What would you say?
Yes. So definitely I would recommend to anyone to develop a meditation practice, that really gets you into that place of learning that, okay, your thoughts are going to come there and you can allow them to come and go, and that you don't have to become fixated. It helps you to kind of clear your mind. That to me is a huge component of learning not to worry, or learning how to say, okay, I feel this and I'm okay with that feeling being there. It's not, it doesn't define who you are, right?
That's such an important point, being okay. And that's why I started interjecting, because it's being okay. So first of all, understanding that the thoughts will come. There's nothing we can do to stop that.
Yes.
And being okay, but not dwelling on it, which I heard you say, which I think is really significant.
Yes. Not dwelling on it, giving yourself space, giving yourself space that if they do come, that you're part. So you're part of this. You're like, all right, okay. So this is where we are right now. So I'm going to give myself some time, whatever that means. If you got to go take a walk, read a book, take a nap, meditate a little, take a hot bath, whatever it is that you then need to insert it's like having a person that you love come to you and say, I'm not feeling so great. You turn on that thing of, okay, what do you need? Do you want some tea? Do you want, right? Like you go into care mode. So we've got to go into self-care mode and allow ourselves the space to feel that. Okay, this is what I'm feeling. I've got to go through it. This also comes with maturity, because when you're younger, feelings come up, you don't know what to do with them, and right. So this is what I say again. Right. It's a practice. It's also giving yourself grace to know that, hey, I'm human. This happens. Okay, so I had a reaction to something. Hopefully you've got people around you who can also give you grace. And the other parts are things like learning to dial in. This is where mindfulness and mindfulness meditation comes in, is that you start to track your thought process. You start to notice, okay, I'm really hard on myself. Why do I say these things to myself? Really start to reframe and reword things that you say to yourself, because we're trying to get ourselves going in this direction. So if for 20 years you said, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm so this, you got to start saying, no, you're not. Start fact checking. Right. Am I stupid? No, I'm not stupid, but this happened and I made a mistake and I'm human. So it's a daily process of all kinds of there are all kinds of tools, that you can implement. But certainly for me, it starts with the self. It starts with knowing yourself. It starts with, because if you go into a game, a competitive game, a performance, you want to know that if something happens, that does not then define you as a human being. It's something that happened in your life.
Yeah.
But it's not who you are, and it doesn't make you bad or wrong, or these are things.
That ties directly into giving yourself the grace and space that you just referred to, right? Like, it's not beating yourself up because something bad happened, and we call it bad, but that's a perceived bad sometimes, because sometimes what we think is bad might work out in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And I think of say Perdita Felician, who had a terrible thing happen in the Olympics, and I see her now on TV.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, I know that the space between that moment and this moment, there must have been a lot of pain and strife and healing and grieving and all those things. But now, it's almost like, hopefully a person like that who goes through something like that can look back and go, what did I learn? Why did that happen? Was there a reason? Look at how well I'm doing now. Like, so it's understanding, okay, it's hard to say, but everything happens for a reason. I truly believe that, certainly to an extent. But it's being able to kind of accept when things happen as well, but not allow it to define who you are.
Yes.
Because you know who you are.
Yeah, that's such an important point, and we do beat ourselves up an awful lot, Ayanna. We do when things happen, and we've got that grace of space and the forgiveness of who we are. And the one thing that I'm a really big fan of is keeping track of your wins, capturing your wins and your milestones, because as time goes on, it's really easy to go, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. But at the same time, you can look at all the other things that you had done. And I remember, years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine about, we were talking about the internet, and he goes, you can't control, the things that, so say someone puts something on the internet about you, you can't control that, but you can control the other things that you do. And the more wins you pile on that, the less and less those bad things show up in the search rankings, right? As an example. And so it's very similar in that respect, where you keep piling on the wins, but also keeping track and remembering them at the same time.
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that, because I was looking for a story that I posted in 2021 at some point. And my memory of 2020 and 2021 are like, they're enmeshed. Like, what's what from what?
Me too.
And when I was going back, I thought, oh yeah, you forget, right?
Yes.
We are more naturally geared to remember things that are bad. We have this negative bias thing. It's an evolutionary thing that makes us focus on things that are bad, because in the past we would have to know where danger was. We would have to know not to go in that part of the forest, because whatever, right? So we naturally go there. But I love the practice of really celebrating your wins, small wins. Small wins, because sometimes we've got big goals, but we've got 20 steps to get there.
Right.
We're not celebrating step 1, step 2, step 3, because without step 3, there would be no step 6.
Exactly.
So you've got to really, I love that. Celebrate all your wins. The other part of that is that, we live in, I guess, a culture and a society where it's like, oh, you're conceited if you talk about yourself or whatever.
Such a fine
And
line,
to me, it's just like there is a fine line of of bragging,
yes,
but
yes.
why can we not celebrate and be proud? To me, I liken it to like, okay, if God gave me gifts, and I'm proud of the gifts that God gave me, and I'm proud of the way that I'm using them. And I think it's okay, not that you've got to go around saying this to anyone, but you've got to know this for yourself. In your head, you've got to know, no, I have these gifts. This is how I'm using them. I'm grateful, gratitude too. I'm grateful. Stay in that space so that you can be able to receive more.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the whole bragging thing is it's an interesting one because I think first of all we don't belong in people's heads anyways, nor do they belong in ours, and so
Yeah.
I think if we also remember that, and again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting your wares on display, so to speak, right,
Yeah.
and showing off what you can do, because what I also think too is we have the ability to impact other people.
Yeah.
If you didn't decide to take that step and step into this new arena, this new space, you wouldn't be able to assist the people that you have been. But the only way you could have been able to do that is if you acknowledge what you had in you to begin with, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
I think that's what we've got to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it goes both ways. You celebrate your wins, you
Yeah.
acknowledge and accept the things that haven't gone well, and you use those as stepping stones to understand what, okay, what could I learn from that? Or, for instance, if something happens that's not as you would plan, learning to accept and grow from those experiences as well. So it's not to be lopsided and be like, oh, look at everything's so great, because life is both ways. I was just talking to someone about being the notion of being realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And usually there's a kind of like being realistic brings you down from dreaming too big, right?
That's right.
And so, right, it's like, but be realistic. And I said, well, being realistic has to encompass both things. It's both good and bad, because reality has both good and bad things, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, okay, I'm being realistic. Am I being realistic, or are you being open to what is going to come anyway that you can't control, right?
Control. The one of the things I thought a lot about, and we sort of touched on in terms of our focus, and then it's the ability to control our focus is really a key in this. I wonder if you sort of touch on that, expand a bit further, because I would think that our ability to control our focus and what we look at and what we, so again, not beating ourselves up when things go wrong, us being able to master that skill. And I do think it's a skill, is that fair to say?
Yes, I do think so. I think it's choosing what to focus on, right? We can choose that there are areas in life where you have choice. Right. What you choose to focus on. An athlete has to be able to drown out all the noise. An artist has to be able to, oh my gosh, there are 2,500 people staring at me dancing. I can't focus on that. That will pull me out, right? So it really is a skill to just be, able to focus and concentrate on the things that matter. And that goes for life as well. When we choose to focus on things that do not serve us, then it pushes life in a direction that we don't want it to go. The same with performance, the same with competition, right? If you're focusing on the person next to you, how's that going to help you? It's not, right? They run their race that they've been training for. You run the race that you've been training for. And yeah, you might be aware of their times, but there's nothing that you can do in this moment. You don't know if you're going to trip, they're going to trip. You don't know. Yeah. And you don't know if they're peaking and they're going to just, you don't know. Yeah. So the only thing that you can do is focus on what you can control. And that means really being mindful, so that, again, when the thoughts come of things that don't matter or things that are not going to serve you, go, okay, got it. Let that go, right? Come back. So imagine sitting for 30 minutes, meditating and noticing those thoughts, noticing the thoughts that come and going up. Okay, you have to go and back to center, back to that neutral space. And then another thought comes and you go up, back to the, so you keep practicing how to go back to the neutral space. That becomes your default more than, oh, what's this? And just focusing on whatever comes to you.
Yes.
You're going, oh, okay, it's like having a force field. Am I aging myself?
Yeah. No. I'm with you. I know the force field talk.
So force field, and it just sort of, you see it, it comes and it just bounces.
That's enough. Yep.
Right.
Yep. I love just the whole self-talk thing. Like, yeah, there's that thought. Yep, there it is. There, yes. Like, so because you're acknowledging it now, and now that you've acknowledged it, it's almost like okay, it's time to go now. Please leave and go back to center, so to speak. So I love that.
Yeah, you're not giving it power, right? You're going, I see you.
That's right.
I'm not scared of you. I see you, and I'm not permitting you to stay.
Yeah, I love it.
Right.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was reminded. So my son's 15 years old, plays a lot of basketball, and a couple weekends ago, I brought a buddy of mine to hey, let's go watch him play. He hadn't seen him play in a while, and we sat down and we were just kind of at the at the edge of the court, and my friend calls out. So the game is kind of starting, and my friend calls out to my son, and I said, "Don't bother. He's not going to hear you. He's not going to see you." And he's like, "What?" He's so into it. He's not going to hear or see you. And at the end of the game, my friend said, "Hey, I was calling you. You hear me?" He was like, "No, didn't hear you." Because of that level of focus that we just talked about, and how important that is. And again, if you can master that, because even in that same vein of children in sports, I oftentimes will see other parents that will call out to their kids, and they're having conversations with their child while they're in this arena of sport. And again, it could be dancing on the stage, on a speech, like giving a speech or whatever, like. The idea of having to interrupt someone while they're performing to have a conversation, it doesn't make sense, right? And so the focus thing is huge.
Yeah, the focus thing is huge, and for parents, that's a moment where, I mean, you don't need to do that with your son, but there are times where like another parent may antagonize a kid, and that's when the parent of that kid needs to say, "Listen, you're good. You've got this. Don't worry about that," like reinforcing that sense of like, because I do think it's part of the job of the parent to help to instill and solidify that feeling of knowing and self-confidence and esteem within that child.
That's big.
Right. And then the child, hopefully, in a typical progression of things, this is not how it always happens, but and then the child should, out of that, then know themselves, right? Oftentimes, of course, that does not happen, and then it's the responsibility of the individual at some point in their life to figure out, no, I'm good enough, I'm worthy, I'm great at what I do, I don't have to, like, to make that shift and really be conscious and cognizant of that.
Yeah. Again, I love the self-talk. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Wondering out of curiosity if sort of when the connection was made between performance and the mental component. Do you have a sense as to, because I would think for me it was relatively new, the whole idea of that the two are linked, and I'm wondering, do you know the history in terms of when it was identified?
So I am not sure in this moment. I feel like I probably did this in my master's, which was years ago, but I do know, like, for instance, my mentor, who has just recently passed, when we were with him, which was about almost 10 years ago, he was 30 years into the field, and he was one of the pioneers.
Gotcha.
So I don't think I think there probably is more literature from before that, but in terms of it being a sort of like burgeoning, emerging field, probably the last 40 years, right. I want to say 45 years.
Which is relatively still quite young, really, right?
Yes. Now, don't quote me on that. That's something that I need to check. But in terms of like what I know in terms of pioneers in the field and stuff like that, that's kind of the number. But
because and I ask because I can see it sort of being a light bulb moment for a lot of people, and maybe you've experienced that with some of your clients, where you start to have those sort of conversations, or like, oh yeah, my mind wasn't clear when I was getting ready to perform,
Oh yeah.
or my thoughts were preoccupied, or I was thinking about other things. And so I guess I'm not necessarily seeing that as something that people automatically connect the mental
Yeah.
aspect and the performance.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm always amazed at people who you look at and you go, oh my God, you're so good. You're such an amazing performer. And then you get behind the scenes and it's amazing how much is going on for them, you know,
Right.
internally and the struggles. And I'm going, wow, you have figured out a way to mask that on stage. Cause I couldn't tell necessarily, but um, yeah, it's a tough one. I totally forgot your question.
No, no, it's just clients coming to the realization that
Oh
there's a
yeah, the light
connection,
bulb
right?
moment.
Yeah,
The
that
light
light
bulb
bulb. Yeah,
moment. Oh
yeah.
yeah. So but what I realized too is that there is a light bulb moment of like, oh my gosh, this connects to that, this connects to that. But
Yes.
it's an ongoing thing. Like every one of the clients that I've worked with is like, yes, I would like a tune up. Yes, I need this because, you know, it's a lot to unpack in 3 months,
Right.
40 years of
Right. Right.
practicing in this direction, right? So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of deep work. And actually, a lot of the work that I do has to do with, you know, your subconscious blocks and you being a phenomenally skilled, say, athlete,
Right.
artist, or whatever, but something's still preventing you and blocking you from getting to where you need to be. So, what is that, you know, and where did that come from? And when did that begin? And you don't
Yeah.
remember it because you've
Yeah.
blocked it, you've pushed it aside, but it's still there and it's still affecting and impacting you. So we do work where that's concerned.
Uncovering those mental blocks are huge, Ayanna, because you've got no idea. In some instances, you may not know where they are, that they exist. First off, because
Absolutely.
it's kind of your way of life and how you've always operated. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, other instances, maybe individuals are being very conscious about putting up that barrier and they know that it's there, but they're just not
Mm-hmm.
going on the other side because they don't want to deal with it.
Yes.
But in either instance, like that mental block component, that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge one to overcome.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I will say, most people, so there are definitely some clients who have just absolutely no clue. They think, oh, no, everything's fine, everything's great. There are some who are like, yes, this is an issue. Even when they know that X is an issue, there's Y beneath the surface, right? There's even more stuff that you can unearth and go, oh, that's connected. You know, I was working with a client, corporate client, who had to do a presentation and she was so stressed for 3 weeks and then we did some digging did some digging and then around 7-year-old pops up
Wow.
and we figure out that she was in French immersion class and she didn't speak French well enough because she came in after the other kids and so she was always so scared and nervous to speak and so that was then linked to the present and to how she approached she got like sick to her stomach because she was so anxious and nervous and so we work, you know, it's things like that where she'd go, oh my God, I didn't think it would have been that. I'm like,
Wow.
yeah, that's the point is that we don't the thing that it actually is we don't have that awareness because we
Right.
blocked it.
Right.
That's the whole point.
It's like you're digging, but keep digging because there's more. Oftentimes, it sounds
Exactly.
like is that wow,
Exactly. Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
wow. No, that's well. What's sort of making me think is like, okay, so even myself. Okay, so what blocks? Why? Because there's subconscious blocks, right? There's blocks
Mhm.
that we just don't know exist, and
Yeah.
which you're alluding to. So to be able to uncover those,
Yes.
uh, the level of work and digging, and I mean digging with big shovels and pitchforks.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely.
It's heavy lifting and you know it's really giving people the space to you know own some stuff that's really tough and that they've tried to forget and they haven't shared with anyone in decades. That is often something that I hear and it's like I haven't talked about this and it's just you know sometimes I walk into a session and just I need to cry for 20 minutes you know but
Wow.
it's because people are holding so much. This is where the mental health stuff comes in because yes, as people, but certainly high performing individuals hold a lot in, because in order to shine in this way on this stage or whatever, you can't have your
Yeah.
baggage bogging you down. So
Yeah.
you just keep it inside,
Yeah.
you deal with it however you're meant to deal with it, and then it starts to affect you adversely. So it's really important that we continue to shine a light on mental
Yeah.
health when it comes
Yeah.
to high performing individuals.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I absolutely have to talk about resiliency, because I think this is an
Mhm.
important part of the conversation,
Yeah.
and our ability to really bounce back when
Mhm.
situations like if you sort of keep in perspective the big picture, and that life has its hills and valleys.
Mhm.
I think that can certainly help with the ability to bounce back, but that
Mhm.
still is problematic and difficult for some people, isn't it?
Mhm. I think I think with resilience, yeah, the imagery that I was just getting as you were speaking was like when you get like the flu, and you have to rest. But then
Right.
when you're rested, then you're good to go, right? But I think in terms of like performance, the aspect of resting, pausing, giving yourself a moment or a break
Mm-hmm.
is the kind of precursor to the resilience, right? That most people want to skip over, because resting for a high performing individual is like almost like the number of people that I deal with where I'm like, take a break,
Right.
pause, stop.
Right.
No,
Right.
I got to keep going. I got to keep pushing. I've got to be resilient. To me, resiliency has two sides, right? So it's the part of you that gets up and bounces back, but
Yep.
there's also the part where the grace comes in and the compassion for yourself, that you need a minute to 2 seconds,
Right.
even, an hour, even just to even process that something happened that you need to be resilient from. Sometimes we just skip over that point and we're just bouncing back in the mental toughness. And then there's this that you just haven't dealt with. So guess what? That's coming with you,
Yes.
right? Right. So to me,
I
the
agree.
resilience is, yes, a huge buzzword right now.
Yes.
But what is resilience actually to me is just, it's having the capacity to accept and understand that something has happened that you need to be resilient from. Give yourself the space and then get up. Because if you give yourself too much space, well, then we're in trouble, right? So, but give yourself the space, grieve, hurt, whatever the case is, and then go, all right,
Right.
now it's time to go. Because if you give yourself the space, the less likely it is that that thing will be coming with you because you've
Right.
acknowledged it,
Right. Right.
right?
Very similar to the self talk we do when those negative thoughts come in. We
Yes.
acknowledge them. Yes, they're there. I've always sort of been a big fan of, when bad things happen to you,
Mm-hmm.
take the time that you need to get through it, but just don't stay there.
Just
And
don't stay
the
there.
time that I need, or the time that you need, or time, it's all going to be different.
Different.
But regardless, take that time.
Total. I am in 100% agreement of that, because you know, you take the time, you allow yourself, and it could, like you said, it could be an hour for somebody, it could be a couple days.
Right.
Remove the judgment
Right.
from yourself that you should be moving quicker or whatever,
That's a big one.
right? It's the judgment component and the compassion component. So within that part where you have to stop, accept, you got to have compassion for yourself and don't judge whatever your process is or your journey. If it's going on for 2 weeks, then you got to go talk to someone,
Right.
right? That's when you implement, go or talk to someone right away to
Sure.
help expedite the process. But if okay, this is something that I've been there before, I just need to sit with it for an hour or two, and then I should be fine. But if
Yes.
something is persisting, pick up the phone, talk to someone, get
Yes.
it out, get a different perspective, get it off your chest, and then get up and go again.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your. I'm glad you raised the point of no judgment,
Yeah.
because that's the one. When we beat ourselves up, it's often because we're judging ourselves based on what we're supposed to be, or what people think
Yes.
we are, or who we
Yes.
thought we were. Like, it's all judgments, and we can sort of strip
Yeah.
that away and deal with us as the individual. I think we're setting us up for success there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're all human. We all have stuff. every single one of us goes through something, some challenge. It's part and parcel of us being human. And so if you learn not to judge that, I mean, how much more freeing is that to be able to go through the thing that you were going to have to go through anyway at some point? If you try to pretend that it doesn't exist, it'll show up in 10 years in a different way, psychologically, physiologically, right? So deal with things as they come, deal with them, release them, and then keep moving.
Yeah, you're right. They do come back if they're not dealt with appropriately, right?
Absolutely.
You think of dandelions or weeds. If you don't deal with them properly at the root, they will appear.
They will appear.
And you're gonna go, I thought I got rid of this, but you're back again, right?
Yeah, really exactly. Didn't. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, this is awesome. So first off, totally love the conversation, Ayanna, and I really thank you for being here and chatting. I guess I gotta touch on your Lion King performance. You were part of that production, and that's a performer in you. I wonder if you sort of I guess when you look at where you are now, and I oftentimes kind of think when you sort of reflect on our lives and look back at all the experiences, they kind of point us to some where we're at now. Do you find your experience with Lion King also helped with where you are now?
Oh my gosh, one of the most pivotal, rewarding, unique, special times in my life. I mean, I wasn't even doing musical theater before that. I didn't go to musical theater. I fell into this. And I just say that just to say it was such a gift. It was such a gift in my life that just from a performance perspective, from a cultural perspective, because this is one of the shows where it was almost an all Black cast. So I went from there to Stratford Festival, which is a very different experience, right?
Got you.
So to have had that be my first kind of, in my indoctrination into—
That's pretty significant in that regard.
Pretty significant. Yeah. Everything about it, everything. It was such a magical show, and it allowed me the opportunity to perform at such a high level. Both Lion King and Stratford were like, top tier. And so it allowed me to have an experience that now feeds into how I view performance and how I view, a client who walks in and what people are capable of and what you have to overcome and injury and, all kinds of things. Performing when there was SARS and there were people in the thing with masks and there were 20 people in, like all kinds of mental things that you realize, okay, we had to like push through this performance. Or one of the most, oh my gosh, did you see The Lion King?
Not the live production, no.
No, okay. So there's a scene where it's the grasslands, right?
Yep.
And so the performers, we all have these big hoop skirts on and grass heads. Okay. And you're just kind of shuffling around, creating this like grasslands. Yep. While Simba and Mufasa are, romping through the grasslands. But this skirt is such that you have to be so still, because if you move, the skirt would do this. So my skirt did this, and then I stepped through it. Right. And then Mufasa had to reach down and grab me and pull. I mean, it was just such a mess. And then you think, how did I get through the rest of that scene?
Yes. Yeah.
Without so these are the moments that you kind of reflect on and you go, oh yeah, this was a kind of mental awareness, a mental, I don't know, toughness is such a buzzword, but you're in front of 2,500 people with this happening. And these moments where you just have to adjust and keep going and just not even pause to think what happened. Like, nope, you're right back in there. You just keep it going, and when you're at that level with those kinds of performers coming from New York, South Africa, the Caribbean, the States, like, it makes you perform at your highest, And so it also goes to show you how important it is who you have around you, how that influences you, These are things I really can think back and go, yeah, that was a very special time.
Well, it's interesting. Funny you mentioned mental toughness, and that's a term that I'm not 100% sold on. Like, I understand what it says, but it suggests something that I don't think is always in terms of the toughness piece.
Yeah. Same.
But but yeah, but the point around the performance, the whole idea of the show must go on,
Yeah.
is really what we're talking about. I think that's
Yeah.
a great analogy for life, right? So things happen, and so for example, let's say you're driving on the 401, and someone cuts you off at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, your journey doesn't stop. You still
Right.
gotta go to work or wherever you're going to.
Right.
So it doesn't stop. And so
Right.
it's the same idea where things must continue, find a way to get through that,
Yes.
and push ahead, because there's a bigger picture here.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that I love that 401 analogy because nothing can get you more upset than someone cutting you off. But, I say to, family members, my husband, I'm like, okay, so he cut you off and
Right.
now he's gone and it's over.
Now
So
what?
are we going to talk about it for the next 5 minutes? It's literally over.
Yeah.
So it's true. And the same thing with a performance. The moment is over. When you go backstage, you can laugh about it, but
Sure.
not in the moment. You have to stay present, and
Yes.
you've got to get the job done. And then afterwards you can go, oh my God, wasn't that funny when that happened? You can
Right.
reflect, but
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But you don't stay in it to kind of let it absorb
That's right.
your energy,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give a quick story of the 401. So I remember one summer I was not summer rather, it was winter, and I had hit a snowbank in my car, and I literally lost control on the highway.
Wow.
And my car sort of spun around, and all of a sudden I'm facing the opposite direction, and I remember my car just stopped, and so the engine kind of shut down for a second. I'm like, what do I do? But like,
Wow.
you have to go. So I remember kind of, turning an engine, it started up again.
Yeah.
I used the car, I didn't do the button thing. That shows
Yeah.
you how long I'm going to have.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself now too. But nonetheless, I turned the key in the ignition, and I started on the journey. And I had to continue on like this thing didn't just happen. And so it's very much in line with what we're talking about, that you've got to continue. And yes, acknowledging that things are going to happen. If you're a runner and you trip coming out of the opening block of a big race, it's going to happen. Do you stay down, or do you get up and continue, right? And so that's really, if there's a sort of strong message that I'd love for listeners or viewers to sort of take home, it's the idea of continuing to push through, because it doesn't stop because a bad thing happened.
Exactly. And the piece that I would add to that is to keep going in the present moment. But once you probably got off the 401, or once you finished the race that didn't go as well, or once you get back off the stage because you stepped through a grass skirt and something crazy happened,
right?
Do take the time to pause and go, okay, that just happened. I did push through. I was present in the moment, but I do have to reflect, right? It's like that post-performance review, right? Where you go, what worked, what didn't work, kind of thing. Okay. That's something that I probably wouldn't choose. Not talking about spinning on the 401, but certainly in that case, I would say, you know what just happened? Like my car just turned around on the 401. Oh my God, are you okay? Kind of. Yeah, I'm a little shaken up, but I kept going, right? But it's also taking the moment to acknowledge that it happened and talk about it.
That's right.
Get it out. That's how you release it, accept it, and actually move on. Because sometimes we keep moving, but we're not acknowledging the things that are happening as we're moving forward, because things are happening in life. So take a pause, just go, oh, wow. Yeah, that was rough. Okay. Won't do that again. We'll try this again. Okay. Now keep it moving.
Right. That post conversation that you have with ourselves, with others, is so important. So I'm glad you touched on that and added to that.
Not to the point of rumination.
Yes.
That's reflection.
Yes.
Reflection, not rumination.
Yeah. What can I take from it? What I learned from it? How can I do it better? Those are the positive conversations that you have, as opposed to, oh my gosh, this happened to me. Oh my goodness, why did I do? I'm so dumb. Why did I make that?
Yes.
Those are the conversations.
Exactly. We don't want it going into self-flagellation.
Yes.
We want it to be constructive, right? And be objective about it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Ayanna, this is so awesome. This has been such a great conversation. I'm so glad that we made it happen. When we think about, when we think about this podcast, we very much encourage, the audaciousness and being bold and stepping out. These are all things, we talked about these mental blocks that can get in our way and prevent us from being able to do that. And if we can acknowledge them, whether they're subconscious or conscious, whether we can acknowledge that and find a way to push past it, talk to it, tell it to go away, whatever it is that we do in our journey, we need to do that, because once we can step out and live that bold, audacious life that we're intended to.
Absolutely. I believe that we all have the capacity in one way or another. And so, it's learning how to be respectful, gentle, caring with yourself. You come first, right? Before all the things, you're the person that you got to take care of the most. So
outstanding. This has been so good. Ayanna, for our listeners that wanted to catch up with you, learn more about your work, or follow you, where can we send them?
Okay, so my website is ayannasealey.com. And then I'm at Ayanna_Sealey on Instagram, and Ayanna Sealey on Facebook, Twitter. I think Twitter is Ayanna_Sealey as well. And LinkedIn, Ayanna Sealey. Yeah.
Awesome. All the main ones covered. That's awesome.
I know. It's no fancy. Just pretty basic.
Very cool. Well, look, like I said, I'm big fan of the topic, big fan of your work, and big fan of you and what you're doing. Thank you for being here. Glad that I don't care how many months it took us to make today happen. Yeah. Today happened, and that's the most important part. So thank you for being here, Ayanna.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. All the best.
Take care.
Back we are on the podcast, and I want to send my appreciation and thanks to Ayanna for providing some fantastic insight on mastering our mental performance and how it can positively impact our entire lives when we do so and achieve that mastery. I want to, and I want to stress, in our entire lives. And I know much of the conversation is centered around mental performance in the athletic space. But the same could be said, again, if we were in the boardroom giving a presentation, on stage delivering a performance, or having a difficult conversation with a partner, and again, and that's within the context of a relationship. It all holds true, and I'd encourage you to bear that in mind the next time you're about to give your own performance, regardless of the landscape or the situation or the environment that you're in. Ayanna left us with a lot of great points, but if I were to reflect on my conversation, and there's one thing I take away from our chat, it would be this. A key skill to developing mastery over mental performance is the ability to remain in the moment. Most of us have a tendency to either live in the past or in the future. We find ourselves, thinking about what happened yesterday or what may happen tomorrow, causing us to not fully appreciate what we have in front of us in this exact moment. Our happiness doesn't lie in the future, but rather in the present moment where we are. And it's such a significant point. The problem is that life doesn't always, when we know that the life doesn't last forever. And one day, these people are going to look back and realize they spent their whole lives looking forward to the future or worried about the past rather than enjoying the audacious moments in front of them. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter in your email address, and you'll be immediately notified every time we've got brand new content that comes out. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, I would encourage you to give us a rating, leave us a comment, help the podcast continue to grow, and that's how we can do this together. Many thanks to our amazing Audacious lovers, all those lovers of audaciousness. I appreciate your tremendous support muchly. So thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.